Gabriel Gage, also known as Nova Online, has spent so much of his life on the internet. In fact, if I were to gauge it, I'd say over 60% of his entire lifespan has been gazing down at a screen. And of that, in his life as an adult, has spent some of that time talking to those under the age of 18, in ways worlds away from ever being appropriate. Spending so much of his time posting to the World Wide Web and having oh so many critical eyes on him, it's almost a guarantee anything remotely bad that he's done will see the light of day eventually. No one must have told young Nova that when you post to the internet, it's truly there forever. Today, we may have found an example of that permanence, with an age regression Wattpad story supposedly written by the Nova himself, an acquaintance of his made during his time spent on Wattpad that was far under the age of 18 at the time. Let's get after it, Grubbas. So starting off strong, reread this on stream the other day, but this is Nova's age regression story that he wrote on Wattpad. If you don't know what Wattpad is, it's kind of a place where you can write all sorts of your own fan fictions about anything you want and post it for the whole world to see. And you see, while Nova may be inspired by his own age regression story, or just so inspired by age regression as a whole, a story of his own started brewing in his head, and oh boy was he ready to share it for the whole world to see. That's when we'd see him post Selena's age regression, a story on how Emily discovers agery from her big sister and starts doing it herself. This would be posted under his Wattpad account Magic Wizard, which I believe is a handle he's used in the past too. And there are a good amount of things that really lead us to believe this is in fact Nova himself, and this account was open and active for a number of years too. We'll get to some of the evidence later, but one thing about the story is that it was posted roughly when Nova was around 17 years of age, and if you fellows remember anything about Nova from around that time period, that's when we would see the earliest recorded evidence of his age regression and him getting into that age play stuff. Pretty evident here with this Quora post that everyone was talking about around 10 months ago, where he would say, "How do I convince my mom I want to be put back in diapers at 17? So moving on to the story, despite what the description would say, it actually follows a girl named Selena, who is a bisexual 17-year-old. And the story would open up with, "Sometimes I wish I could regress to a younger age simply because growing up is hard to face." So right off the bat, we're swatting away any defense Nova has ever made where this could ever be a trauma response, because it's pretty evident he was just kind of into this stuff. So then, given the context of that Quora post, you may be thinking, oh, maybe he really wanted to get into this age play, age regression stuff. Mama Gage was having a hard time rationalizing buying her 17-year-old son diapers. So to get out all his frustrations when it comes to this stuff, maybe he was just writing a story that would kind of mirror his life. He was 17 years old, this girl's 17. Starts to make a little sense there. But then you get a couple lines down and you see that he writes, "My sister Kelsey, whom is 2 years younger than I am." So then Nova's an only child. Maybe this isn't supposed to mirror his life exactly. And just what goes on with this sister it's a little worrisome, but we'll continue on, where the whole plot of this fan fiction essentially surrounds the two sisters babysitting their 1-year-old neighbor's daughter. And as soon as I saw that, some alarm bells were ringing in my head, because why are we writing on a site where there's a whole lot of X-rated content written about on here about a pair of sisters babysitting someone so young? That was extremely alarming to me, why 17-year-old Nova was thinking about that all on his own. But you'll see exactly why with this next, where that main protagonist, who I still believe is kind of supposed to be mirroring Nova at this point, remembered that the little fella that they were babysitting looked so happy in their diaper and pacifier that they rationalized, maybe I should take a couple diapers home with me and a pacifier. So not only is this weird fanfic surrounding babysitting, of all things too, it also involves stealing some diapers and a pacifier from the person that they were supposed to be babysitting. And that really just gets you wondering, did Nova get into this all because he stole diapers from someone else? Was he a diaper thief? And that's what started it all? And what's even worse is that he's writing about here who is 2 years younger than the protagonist, who's the same age as Nova was at the time during the story, is also stealing the diapers and getting into whatever this degenerate diaper shit is that Nova was into at the time. And after a few paragraphs of awful storytelling, we get to the meat and potatoes of it all, where Nova finally gets to happily write about a pair of two sisters getting into this weird age play stuff. And obviously Nova doesn't have any sort of siblings, which is super weird. I don't know why he had to include this main protagonist's sister in all this. It starts leaning into a really weird direction, weirder than it could have been with just this one protagonist. And again, I can't highlight enough just how weird it was that this sister had to be 2 years younger as well. But aside from the sister bit, I think this is where the story takes its main step away from mirroring Nova's life and starts walking down into fantasy land, where Nova starts imagining all these sorts of scenarios where he wished his life headed down that path, because clearly he was having a hard time convincing his mom that, hey mom, I know I'm 17 years old and 1 year away from being a legal adult, but I think I really need to start getting into wearing diapers again. So he starts writing about this weird situation where their mom finds them with their diapers, and it gets a little too graphic in my opinion with how exactly the mother found them. It was real disgusting stuff when I was reading this. But not only is the sister, but now the mom is getting in on this weird age play stuff, but he's writing about the mom not being ashamed of these kids getting into this at all. The mom actually didn't shame them whatsoever in the story. Something I could imagine was completely opposite of whatever was going on in Nova's life at the time if he was really trying to bring up the fact that he thinks he should be getting into wearing these diapers. Truly though, this protagonist was living the dream, in Nova's eyes at least, where not only was this mom not shaming them at all, but was going to the store, buying them pacifiers, buying them diapers, baby formula, going ahead and feeding them that formula. It was absolutely disgusting shit to read, and this is literally Nova's perfect fantasy world, where he gets to wear his diapers, Mama Gage gets into it. This is so incredibly worrisome. And again, as Mama Gage gets weaker and weaker, she's pretty disabled right now, I start to fear for her safety, where it was fairly evident during some crucial developmental years that he was fantasizing about this weird mom stuff getting into his age play. So as Mama Gage starts to get a little more vulnerable in her older years, and we've seen recently with Nova getting back into the age regression stuff with commenting under that really weird YouTuber we saw not too long ago, I'm incredibly afraid that we're going to get some Chris Chan level news in our near future. But moving on from that incredibly alarming story that Nova had wrote himself, that wouldn't be the only thing he was getting up to on Wattpad, because of course on Wattpad you can read all sorts of stories. You don't have to just post them yourself. So if you go on over to his reading list, you see this specific story that really caught my eye, called Little Princess by Age Regression Kitten. And what was really concerning to me was all these tags underneath this story. Let's go through them. So we start off with age regression, age regressor, but then we go on to breastfeeding, to diapers, to fantasy, to pull-ups. I really want to know what was going through Nova's head while he was reading stories like this. And while his self-published story was published when he was 17, this account was at the very least active from 17 through 19. So 2 years at the very least of him having this magic wizard profile. He was an adult, so I don't know, just incredibly predatory in my opinion. So we've covered about 2/3 of the things that you can do on Wattpad. You can write your own stories to share to the public, or you can read stories other people have posted. But one more thing about Wattpad is that it functions kind of like a social media platform as well. You can make friends and form connections with people, and Nova would do just that in a way on Wattpad when he came across someone who was writing a fanfic about him. Now, I actually didn't go ahead and read this fanfic, but if I'm not mistaken, it might have been a little X-rated in nature. At the very least, there was some shipping to be done with other people in that fanfic. And Nova, he'd come across it and leave his notes, I guess, letting the writer know, for clarification, I don't wear that onesie in public. And of course, urging the poster to continue posting updates. And, after reading this story, he'd go ahead and reach out and say, add me on Xbox. Now, Nova, and we'll call them User for now, would begin to talk on Discord, and, they wouldn't become the closest of friends, but whenever Nova forms an acquaintance, of course, his first order of business is always dump any sort of problem he's having on them and complain about his life, and that's all their relationship ever really amounted to, was here and there they'd talk about some video games, or Nova would dump whatever awful things were going on in his life at the time. Of course, though, he continued to provide notes on that fanfiction this person was writing on Nova with, "If you continue your fanfiction, don't fit me with Tofia. I fucking hated it when you did that." But with this friendship that was more like an acquaintanceship, I guess you could call it, Nova would get added to a Discord or a group chat with, I'm assuming, friends of the user, where Nova would just openly vent about, say, being scared his address will fall into the wrong hands of someone, or just generally, I'm guessing, his battles with the trolls were spoken about in this group chat. And you may be thinking at this point, well, McGrubba, aside from this being a little odd that he's trying to form some sort of friendship with someone writing a fanfic on him, so I guess you could kind of call them a fan. What exactly is wrong with this all, aside from it being a little weird? And the true concerning bit of this all would be that this would be back in 2023, so Nova would be around 19 years old at this time, if I'm not mistaken. And the user in their profile, plain as day, had their age as about iOS 14 to iOS 15. So all those profile visits Nova had to their profile when he was reading this fanfic, he had right in front of his face the age of this person, and he continued to pursue a friendship with them and kind of vent to them and all their friends, all these other people in this Discord server, who I can only assume are around the same age as this person, assuming this is like their friend group, for example. And while luckily nothing inappropriate was said between the two, according to the user, that may have just been because they were mostly aware of Nova Online already by then. So you can imagine there was almost like some sort of trolling aspect behind this. But again, just to kind of highlight here the fact that I really do believe that all these screenshots are true and that this account, Magic Wizard, was run by Nova himself. We have this screenshot in that group chat where Nova says, "Call me kitten one more time, and I'll be Will Smith, and you'll be Chris Brown." Incredibly comical. It lines up with the awful punctuation and grammar of Nova. And I believe he got it wrong here. I think he was trying to talk about the Chris Rock incident where Will Smith slapped Chris Rock back in 2022. So then there we have Nova threatening a whole bunch of people who are iOS 15 or 14. Then we have the fact that Magic Wizard was also used in his old YouTube channel. The speaking patterns are all the same. Of course, they also have a Nova Online Discord. And nothing truly ever came of this, so I don't really think this was anyone trying to clout chase by pretending to be Nova, as funny as that whole premise would be. Either way, this is just some pretty alarming stuff that came out of his whole Wattpad era that I just thought I had to share with all of you. Anyways, besides being appalled at it all, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like up and hype it up if you did. And maybe even subscribe if you just liked me that much today. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Later, Grubbas.